everyone, and welcome to another Science Cafe. Today here are Professor Petersburger, public speaking specialist and founder of Sell Yourself courses, Péter Szabo, fifth-year kinesiology student and assistant lecturer of Sell Yourself courses, and Sara Bonet, fifth-year medical student and the president of the neuroscience section. We all know that communication is an inevitable process that we encounter every day in our lives. Today, modern technology dominates our communication. We have a massive range of ways in which we can stay connected, but each channel of communication can influence our relationship in a different way. Social media has been around since the early days of the internet, and it still dominates most of our lives. But what is with our early days? Communication is defined as the imparting or exchanging of information by speaking, writing, or using some other medium. Of course, in order to be able to exchange information, we must first know how to speak and then understand what is said. So, Sarah, not only people communicate. Can you tell us how animals communicate and how their way of communication differs from human communication?
Do you think animals talk? Yes. I mean, do have a guess. Maybe I should ask him or her. They definitely communicate, but I think the crucial part of our not understanding their talk and communication is what we actually think of when saying communication. So is it just, the spoken word, the written word, or is it any kind of giving a clue to other member of your species about what's going on, what are you thinking, and what are you doing? So if we look at our language and what we perceive as language, it's actually assigning a value to symbols. So if you write any letter, we have plenty of letters here on the posters, it's just a symbol. It has no meaning, right? But we somehow learned to assign a meaning to it. And do you think animals can do this, or is this unique to us?
Well, they probably can.
They probably. I wouldn't ask you that. So, did you ever see a video of a dog with owner who's using sign language to communicate? Never? Did you see dogs press those buttons and talk to their owners?
Yeah.
Do these buttons have a meaning?
Well, yes, yeah, they do.
Why? Because we assigned the meaning to them, right? It's a symbol. The button itself is white or black, but has absolutely no meaning added to it. So what's actually unique to our language is this adding some unique symbols, whether it be hieroglyphs, whether it be letters or emojis that we use today. Language and communication is based on creating symbols that have some meaning and value. And believe it or not, animals can do the same. If you look at the tests and experiments with chimpanzees or gorillas, they are able to learn about 400 different symbols with before no meaning, just the meaning that we humans assign to those symbols. So they can learn sign language, they can learn tricks, they can learn to use buttons to communicate. And there are even animals that are capable of learning up to a couple thousand of these symbols or words. So I don't know if you heard a famous story about a dog who learned up to 2,500 different words, which means it had over 2,000 different toys, but it learned what those toys are, specifically by their names. But that's not the only way that we can communicate to animals, and that's not the only way animals communicate to each other. Basically, communication is crucial tool to tell the other the other person, the other animal of your species, of other species, how you feel, what's going on. Is there a danger somewhere around? And animals are very good at this. Turns out maybe we are the stupid ones. We don't understand their system, but they developed a perfect system of communication. So I brought you some brains right here. And let's start with the most obvious one, shall we? You heard of the parrot singing and talking? Well, this is the brain of a parrot. But parrot obviously doesn't know the meaning of all the words. It repeats, just like any other bird outside who learned how to sing, who learned how to attract partner by listening. And what's interesting in birds is they learn this based on the environment they're in. So how do we learn to talk? Who is the one that helps us to learn? What do you think? Parents, obviously, family, the one that we spend most of our time with. And we also do it by listening. But the thing is, we will most commonly learn the phrases that our family is using, that our friends are using. The same thing happens with birds, but it doesn't have to be related to the genes or anything. A bird does not have to learn a song of its father or mother. It learns the song based on the environment where you put it. So birds have dialects. I don't know if you heard about that. You can see birds that have up to 50 different dialects of the same song. It's usually based on higher pitch or a bit lower frequency or a bit faster communication. And based on this, you can specifically see which bird belongs to which territory. And if you move the bird to another territory, it will use the dialect over there because it learned the language by observing, by listening, and it learned the language by seeing how this song with specific dialect affects partners, the other sex of the same species. And birds are very fascinating about this because how they learn to talk is based on how they learn to measure time. Birds learn how to produce the song they've been listening to based on listening and measuring the time difference between each sound another bird makes. And they are not the only species that does this. Another one buddy that I have over here, I don't know if you have any ideas whose brain this might be. Any guesses? Now you know. Yeah, this one belongs to macaque, and they do very similar things as birds. They listen to the sounds their species makes, and they produce different sounds, different vocals, and based on the situation, the emotion they are trying to transfer, they will do it faster or slower, and they will do it higher or lower. But macaques are actually not that good at controlling language. We have species that have way higher control of their laryngeal muscles, which means they can produce way more sophisticated sounds. And that is very close, very similar to what we are doing. We are training our laryngeal muscles, we are learning how to pair them to our cortex, and we are learning how to produce a specific sound in a specific time, at a specific frequency, with a specific volume. So it doesn't matter just the content I'm saying, it doesn't matter just the sound this animal is creating, but it also learned how to use these elements to show its emotion. So for example, if they're at danger, they will do the talk faster. So they can alarm all the other animals that there is danger somewhere around. But we have way more sophisticated monkeys, so obviously this is another monkey. This is orangutan, if I remember correctly. And he's not the only primate. The most primates, most monkeys that you can think of, have very good control over their talking, over their laryngeal muscles, and they can do it very well, which means they might be actually able to imitate the talk that we use, the language that we use to communicate. What's interesting with all these animals, that it seems if you're talking, communicating in a different way, you would be using your brain in a different way than humans, right? If I'm producing a song like this bird outside, I wouldn't need the same parts of the brain that human needs to talk. That would seem like logical explanation, but it's not the case. A study was done on monkeys, on birds, and on sea mammals, and it showed that they use the same parts of the brain that we use to communicate. Why is that the case? Because they use the same principles, the same methods to learn how to communicate. So this monkey, just like this one, will use these parts of the brain just like the humans for their talk. But I will talk about humans a bit later. And another very interesting species, I believe, when we discuss talking and communication, are dolphins. You know, they can perform tricks, they understand our instructions very well. Do you think they can learn our language? And all the elements of our language. Not just the words, not just the letters, but emotions that we are trying to transfer while communicating.
I think not fully, but maybe a part. Don't have to be like this.
Any other guesses?
I think they will understand schools because they are highly intelligent species, and they not only use like I mean when they communicate, they use the application, which is like the next step of the communication that way. So I think yes, most certainly.
Good guess. Good biology thinking. They are highly intelligent species, and they have very similar social structures. They live in groups, just like we, which means that communication is crucial for their hierarchy, for their functioning. And do you think they have names? I mean, we give names to dogs, to cats, to birds, but do you think animals do that in their natural habitat?
Some of them, I suppose.
Well, precisely dolphins do, and there have been few more guesses about other species as well. And dolphins do it in a way that they modulate the type of communication. So you know how they communicate. They do this like clicks when they talk. They use it for echolocation. They use it for communicating with each other. And each of the dolphins is doing it in the same way. You know, the same mechanism is going on in their bodies to produce this sound. But they do it in slightly different frequency, a slightly different pitch. So each of the dolphins actually has a unique, let's say, voice. And based on that, they give nicknames or names to each other so they can recognize a member of their group just on the sound it makes. So I believe this illustrates how communication is important, not just for humans, not just as talking or writing, but how important it was for all animals, for humans as well, to develop a system to transfer information. And not just information about environment, but information about ourselves and our groups.
Can you now tell us how do human speech and language develop?
I will use brain again. Don't mind the colors, please. This is a model of a human brain, with the missing half, obviously. And the marked colors here are actually showing us some areas that we mentioned already. So producing some sound is a motor action, right? You need to control the muscles, you need to control the mouth that you're opening, your larynx, to decide what vocal you produce. So in order to do that, we definitely need our motor cortex, partially. But we also need to learn how to produce the sound that we want, or what sound do we want to produce. So we have to listen to what they're doing, right? Just like the birds listening to the sounds. And we do that with a part of our temporal cortex. As a matter of fact, there are two crucial parts of our brain for language development, for learning how to talk. And we call them Wernicke's and Broca's areas. So that would be this part and this over here. So what do you think, which ability we need to develop first, listening or producing? Listening, obviously. You live in a community. You listen to your members.
May I?
Of course.
You're actually listening to the patterns of sound and the rhythm behind the language. And this is something that little kids do innately. So when they are listening to any kind of talk, because this is the first step of the development, they are listening for the patterns of speech, and slowly they start attributing meaning to these sound symbols. And this way they gradually build up their knowledge, and off of that later there comes speaking. So yeah.
Exactly. And the area that's responsible for this is Wernicke's area.
I was thinking more about like the chicken egg paradox. In the beginning, you have to first like listen to your.
You have to listen to know that something exists in order to reproduce it, because communication is reproducing sounds or movements or gestures, and then later learning what they actually mean. So once we listen to our mom, dad, our family, our environment, we decide which of those sounds are important for us and which of them can we use and give some meaning to them. So once the child is capable of building a base of sounds, it can try to reproduce them. And the area that's responsible for this is the motor cortex, and it's called Broca's areas. And you need these two to interact, of course. You can't have one without another. But why is it important to highlight that we need to listen first? People sometimes think, you have a baby that's like a month or two old. Like, it doesn't understand what you're talking, right? Why would you talk to a baby? It has no idea what's going on. Well, specifically because of this, you need to talk to babies. Doesn't matter if you're cooking, if you're telling them about the walls, they need to listen to the sound. They need to listen to the communication, to the language, and the sounds, the vocals, the phonemes that they will use later on. So whenever you can, talk to the babies. Yes?
So, which is better for the baby brain development? Speaking to the baby in like a normal voice, like I'm doing right now, or using like the baby voice?
There are different opinions on this. Some will say don't use the baby voice, it will make them stupid. The others say don't use the adult voice, they don't understand anything. But the thing is, it's okay for you to start with baby voice. It still has some of the phonemes. But if a baby is capable of reproducing sound, don't continue using this voice till it's like 5, 6 years old. It needs to learn to reproduce more complex phrases, more complex patterns of the language. And once you learn that, you can start developing the Broca's areas. And you heard maybe that we talk with the left side of our brains. Do you think that is entirely true? Do we really have extra unnecessary parts of our brain? Would it be efficient to have something that's using so much energy and not do anything with it? Obviously not. So even though most people have the dominant parts of their motor cortex, of their Broca's areas on the left side of their brains, on the right side of our brain, it also happens something very important. First of all, our right side is usually more prone to recognizing the emotional part of our language. So the tempo that we're using, the volume that we're using, all the rhythm patterns. And there's also one very interesting experiment that shows us how important communication between these two sides are. So in the middle of the brain, you have something you can see here, but it would be here, that we call corpus callosum. And this is the part that is responsible for connecting the two pieces of our brains, the two hemispheres. In some cases of epilepsies, there is no successful treatment. treatment. So an idea was to cut this communication, cut these fibers, and separate the two hemispheres, and that will treat the epilepsy. And the scientists, trying to figure out what's going in our brains when we learn to talk, decided to use these patients and to use this opportunity to study which part of our brain is more important. And there's a very simple thing you can do for that. So you know the opposite part of the body is controlled by the opposite part of the brain, right? Left side of the body, right side of the brain. So if you do that with the patients that have this communication cut, and you give them a simple object, let's call it a ball. You give them to their right hand. They can see it, they just feel it. They try to feel it, and they can tell the shape of it, you know. They have enough sensory input to determine that it's something round. But they're not sure what's the word for it. They're not sure what's the symbol that we use to mark this. If you do the opposite and give it to their left arm, they will not call it a round shape. They will say it's a ball. So why is it one side more important, and why is it only the left side that we use to talk if we actually need both of these sides? The matter is that we mostly use the left side of our brains to produce the voice, and we usually use the right side more to recognize the context. But you can't have just one part of the brain responsible for your communication. Obviously, there is no such thing as unnecessary brain parts, unnecessary cortex that will be completely inefficient. And what I would like to conclude with, before I pass it on, is that the context and your emotions and the rhythm and the sound of your voice are as important as the sound, as the vowels you produce. Because these types of elements give us accents, give us emotional input, and children need this as well to develop their communication. If you don't have accent specific to your language, for the most of the community, you are not understandable. And this is very, very visible and very important for some of the cultures that have very prominent accents. For example, Mandarin language, Mandarin Chinese. If you lose the accent and the rhythm of this language, you are practically not understandable to anyone in the community. So don't just talk, don't just read some sentence in monotone voice, always the same volume, always the same speed. Use all these elements to create the sounds that are interesting for the babies and that are good for their brains. Am I right?
Sure. What I would add to this whole thing, thanks, is that the reason for the frequency change when you're talking to kids is it becomes easier to hold their attention. Because if you go there with a high pitch, high frequency sound, that stands out of their baseline more, and you get to communicate with them essentially more effectively then. But if you're teaching kids in any context, changing around the tone of your voice can convey to them a large amount of information. So the whole idea of talking to them is more effective if you change around the rhythm and the tone of your voice, because it holds their attention more. And before I start talking, I give the word to Anna once more.
Thank you, Sara. We can say that communication is a long life learning process beginning at birth, even before birth. We communicate in many different ways, like listening, speaking, gesturing, reading, and writing. Communication abilities help children to learn, form social relationships, express feelings, and participate in everyday activities. Peter, why are communication skills important in child development, and how is it possible to stimulate this development?
That's a really packed question. Well, I'm teaching English as a second language and physical education. And my whole idea was to teach in high school, but I got an opportunity half a year ago to go to an elementary school. But for me, essentially, this comes with a problem. So if I'm working with little kids, I kind of have to scale back everything that I do with them. So my idea was to reach back for my applied linguistics and sociolinguistics and psycholinguistics papers, which is kind of like almost like pharmacology for med students. Sorry. So what essentially I had to figure out is how can I develop tasks for them so that it stimulates their whole development. And the reason for why we need this whole thing is because if your child communicates more effectively, they can learn how to process and deal with problems more, because most of the people organize their brain through speaking and talking to each other. It's also important for the career development, because there's been numerous studies showing if your child hears more words, then their IQ, like high-income families, usually teach more words to their kids through stories, and it shows a correlation with how much speech the child is exposed to, and how essentially how smart they become later. And the third reason I would say is that it just makes their life like it makes everything more effective. If you're communicating better, you get to have more friends, because just like playing, language is a part of playing, and communication while you're playing is essential. And if you don't have that before the age of 4, that you're able to play with others, and if you're able to use the language, you will get left behind socially, and that tends to be a problem, because later it will be harder to get into the society, let's say. Um, so there's a couple of ideas that I was running through when I tried teaching kids language. So first of all, as we discussed, the first thing that they do is essentially that they listen a whole lot. Like even in their mother's bellies, I know of experiments that people listen to music more, and they go closer to the stomach and start talking to the baby and whatever, and that might have had some influence on their development. And also the baby, if I'm correct, but you can maybe confirm this, can recognize the voice of the parents even inside the belly. And there's also something that you mentioned, that how we speak to the child, what's the effective way of going about it. And there's this kind of speech called motherese, let's say, which is essentially the mother and the father and everyone around the kids. They start using a language that slightly exceeds the knowledge and the vocabulary of the kid. So the kid is still getting new information with every interaction, but most of the words are already familiar. And this way, the whole context becomes more stable, and the child can learn more effectively. And if we go one step after this, there comes the speaking part, which is essentially the child trying out all the sounds in all languages. And this is really cool, and we've talked about this before, this whole thing, that before the first 6 months, children are able to produce every single sound from every single language. And that ability kind of gets lost along the way. And also it's the case with grammar and language learning as such. There's this language device idea from Chomsky. And essentially what this goes back to is that the older you get, the harder it will become to learn the language. Because your neuroplasticity, cool word, is not that well equipped to learn these things later, let's say. Although there's been studies showing that you can kind of force yourself into contexts where you can language more easily even as an adult. Like if you move to a foreign country, and if it's a part of your livelihood to speak, you're going to make significant progress whether you want to or not. So I think that's obvious. And the later, and if you go further, so there was listening and speaking, there will come reading as well, which is a higher order skill, let's say. And if you're teaching languages to children, you don't want them to, like, it's good if they read because it helps their vocabulary and everything. But there comes the time when you introduce reading as such. And even with kids' books, for context, it's mostly pictures, a couple of words. Mostly pictures, a couple of words. And slowly, just like the Mallory's language, they start to attach all the words to the right context. And when you have all this, then we usually go about teaching them writing, which is again a higher order skill. And if you think about it, if you've ever been in a language exam, let's say, you go through all of these 4 skills. So that's where these ideas like really spring from, I believe. So I was thinking, what would be the right way to teach these kids? Because it's really hard, you know, if you're not an effective communicator, the kids will tell you like, this is boring, and you will stand there, you know, not knowing like what's going on exactly. So I figured I would go back to stories, because what I could do with stories is to bring them down to their level, and just like with the mother race thing, I could teach them a couple of extra words with every story. So what I ended up doing is getting all sorts of stories for them. For example, I bought a book which is about Dirty Bertie. I don't know if you've heard about this. It's basically a very disgusting kid who is eating slugs from the floor and whatever. He does a bunch of crazy things, and the kids also find it disgusting. And this is the main point. But it becomes somewhat interesting for them because it's something that's unusual, and it has the right birth frequency and the right word choice. And I can always get to teach them a couple of extra words while we are going through this. And if you're a really good storyteller, but Joe can help me out with the whole storytelling thing, the kids can be so amazed if you're reading to them or doing whatever. If you think it's stories, the eyes can go like wide and they will ask you questions about it. It's because they stay in the zone of proximal development, which is, you can imagine it like 2 circles. So the middle circle would be the stuff that you know, the things you already mapped out. Because language as such is part of the child's mapping behavior. This is how you interact with the world partner, right? So the middle circle of the proximal development zone would be the stuff you know, essentially. And the next circle would be where you know some stuff, but you also don't know some stuff. And there's the big circle where all let's say the whole world is there and you have to interact with that. So what you want in order to teach kids about language is to scale back what you want to teach them, so they feel like that they know something, but also they get something new. And really going through stories with them that are simple gives them this experience. So I think that's a really, really effective tool. So if you could say some words about storytelling for kids?
Well, okay, about storytelling, well, I have a lot to say, but on Monday there was this workshop on public speaking, and we talked about picture superiority effect. Anyone been in boring university lectures? No one. Never ever. Not in University of Osijek, but some.
Not in pitch.
You know, and not in pitch. Yeah. Definitely not in pitch. And data, and we get lost very, very quickly. There is this amazing neuroscientist who just tried to sum it up real quick. He was really frustrated because he was very passionate and a good researcher, very good teacher, but still, whenever he made tests, only 72 hours after the lecture he gave, And he was asking really the crucial things, what he really wanted to highlight. And do you have any guess what was the percentage among the, let's say, 100% of questions what they could recall? And they are smart kids, smart young adults, after 72 hours. It was only 10% what they could recall. And then he just came back to the language teaching method, how you learn the language at first. You know, they are just, as Sara said, and also as Peter said, you know, they are just abstract symbols. You need to assemble these into pictures in your brain, by the way. And it's a long process. And at any given moment, human populations, more than 50% is functional analphabetic, if you know. So it's just, you know, how many years did it take you to be able to learn to read and write conveniently? It just took you a couple months to understand the picture around you as a baby. So anyway, he got back to the old method. There's a board, apple, and there's a picture on the apple. So whatever he really wanted to memorize during the lectures, he just projected something, picture which is related to that information. What was the ratio? From 10%, 40%. Vote for more, vote for less. 40%. Vote for more, vote for less. 60%. Anyone votes for more, more for less? Okay, vote for more, vote for less. 60%. 1, 2, nothing. Okay, what did I do with you? Actually, right now I tricked you, and I could bring you some smile on the face because as a university professor, I was acting like I'm in an auction. I just played with my tone and tempo, and I put you to a different scene. I created a different story. Whenever you project a picture, it raised to 65%. However, if you embed any information into a story, it's 2000%. Any wise man in human history, from Aristotle, Plato, and so on and so on and so on, they all were teaching through stories because they knew less is more. This is one thing. The other thing, how we start to learn during human development. Whenever we're born, we all grow up through tales. This is the method we learn how to act and interact in human population in any culture. And there's a very strong effect on the desires, adult desires, what kind of fairy tales you grew up on. Yes, I have a lot of students from the Middle East. They have different kind of stories, and they have completely different kind of desires and attitudes based on the stories they grew up on. However, they all have patterns. This is something, if you learn this very easy formula, it's an acronym, STAR formula, what you can use in job interviews or anywhere else, is the situation, task, action, and result.
I've been listening to this for a year.
Sorry?
I've been listening to this for a whole year.
Yeah, but okay, yeah. But any tale, think about it. There is a situation, there is a drama, and there's a task. After that, to be solved, there's a challenge, and there is the action. Rule of 3 or principle 3. There's always 3 challenges what you need to accomplish during the tale, anywhere in the world, anywhere. It's always 3. Or sometimes you go up to 7, but there are these magic numbers, and most of the time you stop at 3. And then there's the result. If it is a boring Disney movie, then it's living happily ever after. Yeah. But this is something very important. And again, you know, if we could be able to get away from all this data processing towards our students and just telling stories again, with less information, but learning more, then we would be way more effective teachers.
I agree.
Mhm.
And if you are on the topic of Disney movies, this is something that I was about to actually talk about. I've read some studies before I came here, and I ran across something that I think is really interesting. Uh, I looked at all the Slavic countries and how language teaching goes, and I found out that in Croatia, in the TV, the movies or the cartoons usually run in English, if you can confirm this. And it turns out this is one of the contributors why, in between the Slavic countries, you guys are ahead in English teaching. And I found it really staggering. So what I did a couple of weeks ago is I cut out parts of Disney movies and I took them for the classes for the kids, so they can learn from those. And what I found out is the picture is there, the sound, the pronunciation is there very clearly. And I also found that the words are simple because it's kids' cartoons like Hercules, um, like there's also Mulan and etc. etc. And what I found is that the word frequencies are so good that they get to sing with the songs, they get to repeat parts, and they get to act out scenes, and all this acting out and trying out these words in context is something that's really crucial. So the kids kind of hate me a bit right now because I'm assigning them movie scenes and almost whole movies, if they can, to watch them in English because, well, if this is working here in Croatia, why not try it in Hungary? And I got some feedback from the kids, and they really enjoy these things. So I think using these stories because they scale on all of the four spectrums kind of that we talked about. I think these are really powerful for teaching.
If I may add something, since you mentioned this listening to the cartoons and everything, have you noticed how important listening to a sound is? I don't know if you ever listened to an Indian guy or Japanese trying to talk English.
Yes.
They live in USA, for example, for over 30, 40 years, and they will never have this clear pronunciation because they never listened to the phonemes that we have in these languages in the period when their brain was developing and learning all the sounds. The same thing goes with bilingual families. If you have parents who are speaking different languages, encourage them to speak one parent, one language method. Their kids will be way smarter because they're exposed to so many different inputs, which is great for developing of their cortexes.
You also gotta try pronouncing these sounds because there's a whole neurocircuit probably designed to do this. I'm not an expert in neuroscience, but I was listening to the Huberman podcast some time ago, and now they are trying to influence these parts of the throat and the whole circuit that governs this with some I don't know what kind of device to stimulate these sounds. But you run into a bunch of problems while you're trying to do this because languages have different kind of codes that they use, and the whole idea behind this meaning thing and all that is that sometimes there are languages where you don't even have the concept of time as such because they use completely different context for the conveying the meaning of time. Let's say maybe seasons. The I'm not sure which nationality this is precisely, but I know at least of one that are not using the standard times that we are talking about. They are using the seasons to communicate the idea of time. So it's not an easy I imagine it's not an easy something to do, to build a device that can influence how you pronounce and what. So I'm looking forward to see what that will result in, essentially. Yes.
Okay. How does poor communication affect a child's development?
In order to develop higher order thinking skills, let's say abstraction or throwing around ideas, you gotta be able to be comfortable using the language as such. And this comes down to essentially an idea from Carl Rogers, if I'm not mistaken, that you have to, again, develop your listening before you start speaking. Because some people, while they are listening to you, they are not really listening to what you're saying. They are thinking about what they are going to say next to what you have just said. So it's like an eternal loop that's playing in their head, and they are not trying to understand what you're saying to them precisely. They want to reply. So I think to teach kids this essential listening skills, this essential listening skill is really, really, really crucial. And you really, really want your kids to be able to think critically. And without the proper use of language and communication, it's really hard to do that, because I have this idea about the law that, there are all sorts of words to describe the law and the rules that we live by. And those words are chosen very, very carefully and precisely, and they are crafted in a way that theoretically you have to interpret them right in order to keep them. So that's what the whole thing goes back to. So if you don't know how to craft your words and you don't know how to formulate your arguments, you will lose some battles against people who know how to do this properly. So if you don't teach children how to speak, communicate, and think logically, later it will bottleneck not just their development, let's say, but their future careers will also suffer from it, because you gotta be able to defend yourself with your words. Because let's say you end up in a fight with your coworker, or you need to convince the teacher to give you the grade 5 instead of the grade 4 or whatever. But if you don't know what to say, and if you don't know how to say it, and if you don't know how to give the clear message, what you want, why you want this, and how you want it, then it really becomes hard, and it's really hard to get by. So an idea that I'm trying to give while I'm teaching the kids in the school is try to come up with the hardest question you could possibly think of, and then go ask that. And sometimes, I work against myself, because sometimes they really ask things that I have no clue about. And I have to go back and read about it and come back next week, and I kind of try to build that into my lesson plans, because the light bulb will go off like, I asked this last week and now he knows something about it. But sometimes I have to admit that I have no clue what they're asking about. And these are 4th and 5th graders and 2nd and 3rd graders. So I think if you want to do this and develop your child's communication skills, getting them to ask really, really hard questions is a good strategy, because in order to get to the question itself even, they have to think about what you're telling them. And if they go through that whole process and they have to ask the question at the end, you will go like, this kid is really onto something, So I think that's a miraculous process, and if they get used to this, I think it will benefit them later on. So this is a very general advice, but for me it works very well. So I hope that you guys will benefit from it too, if you happen to end up teaching kids somewhere. I think that's it for this question. Any questions from anyone? Maybe about teaching or language learning? No? All right.
Just thinking about teaching.
I just have a comment comment on Peter's stuff because like especially in our education system, we talked a lot about it with Professor Heffer that this education system stigmatizes mistakes, unfortunately. So we, well, I love to say not two of us, but the majority just gives you a penalty very, very soon, even in primary school, that if you fail. And the most you can learn from is a mistake. There's nothing to learn from victory. It's like three of my daughters are practicing judo, and we always analyze the losses. Because whenever they lost, we can ask one of the most crucial questions. Okay, what is the smart question? What is the difficult question? It's so lovely that you try to inspire your kids, but there is one word what they always and everyone should keep in their mind is why. Like you had a lovely question to them: why birds are singing?
Yes.
And I had this question. I had this question from my daughters by instinct, and then since I'm a biologist, that was a lovely thing. Okay, let's sit down and listen. And within a couple of minutes, they were able to make difference in between one particular male bird is trying to attract a female or marking the territory. In other words, scare away other males. And within a couple of seconds, they were able to learn it. But it all came with the questions. The question why? Why is this bird singing that? So that's a lovely thing. At least keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Why? You know that how many practicing parents are here? Only two of us. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. But because they have this painful period of why, and it's really frustrating. So whenever time comes, please try to be persistent because after a while, just get away. I don't care why. You will get soon in that mood, unfortunately. But otherwise, we really need to inspire them because then they will challenge us as teachers.
Oh yeah.
And it comes back to another very important thing that because we are a very special species with our ego and superego. What I would talk about a little bit later, but
If I may I
oh,
add
please
something?
do. Please, yeah.
So first off, it was really important for me how I react to the questions, right? Because I told them this is an experiment. Like try to really think of something that I don't know. And how I react to the things that I don't know is, I think, crucial. Because I don't go like, that's a stupid question or whatever, because that would result in them not asking any more questions because you don't want to punish the behavior that's good because that will take away the whole idea of the dopamine feedback loop and whatever. So, and this goes to behavioral psychology and all that. So I tell them, okay, this is really good. I have no clue. And then we go back, and the next week they will come back and ask me like, have you looked it up? So yeah, sometimes if I miss it, it's terrible. So, but how I react to it, that okay, I don't know. I will try to do it, and I will try to do it, and then sooner or later they will hopefully adopt also this behavior of looking up things themselves, thinking about them, and this will go on and on. So this is something that was hard in the beginning for me because as a teacher, it's really hard to admit that you don't know something, you know, if they ask you. I mean, it's not technically hard, but it's like confusing because you're kind of the source of the information, you know? But also knowing how to get the right information and then telling them how this whole process works is important for them because they will be better than us later. They will be hopefully more effective in communicating than us later. So yeah, whatever we can, I think we should give to them in this way as well. Sorry.
No, it's just something extremely important. Again, that it's an old era. So yeah, we both grew up and learned in the university that several times there was no other material than the professor professor could say to us about the topic. There was not even a book. And now everything is in your pocket. I know I ran forward, but still, so just anyone can Google. So for many, many years, it was a huge prestige loss for a teacher, for a professor, if you had to admit that you don't know it. But that was the time when you need to know only one book for a topic, for a subject. And that was enough. And you had to know it, because if you don't know, you are not good enough. But now there could be so many questions, and you can be tested immediately by just Googling. Maybe the source is not right, so we can get to an argument about the results. But recent and future teachers must learn to say I don't know. They must admit, because otherwise that behavioral pattern, what you mentioned, since we are in charge, this is what we're gonna teach. This is what we're gonna teach to the future generation, that's a stupid question. So this is how they're gonna react as an adult as well, whenever they get a question they cannot answer. Instead of, sorry, I don't know, let me look after, and I will get back to you, but it's very important, because that's the biggest prestige loss. If you don't get, because it means that you disregard them. Disregard their ego, and then you're done, because you disrespected them. That's the biggest respect, is to say, sorry, I don't know about it, but I will put all my energy to look after, and let's think about it together to solve the problem. It's a different era, absolutely different era. We need to accommodate to that one, even though as adults neuroplasticity is rigid. Reflexive communication. Yeah. That's all the methodology. Yeah.
Thank you, Peter. And after talking about the development of speech and language, as well as communication skills among children, you must be wondering how to approach a person, or maybe express your different ideas and opinions. Here we have to include psychology. Professor, I recently read a saying that says wise men talk because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something. Is that true? Are there speakers and listeners? And what is the key to a good communication?
I thought a lot about this one, because yeah, you know, I read another saying that the wise man is not even speaking. you are just listening if you're wise. But yeah, there's definitely a point in it, because okay, think about all the, okay, we talk about stories, but majority of communication is what in human communication. What are we doing? Yeah, okay, but okay, you're right. Okay, sorry. My question was unclear, but spoken communication is about what in terms of content. What are we talking about?
Relationships.
Relationships.
Depends with whom are we talking. Because
Yeah, but you are who you are convenient to talk with. You know, friends.
experiences maybe.
Experiences. Yeah. How we deliver them.
In stories.
In stories. Yeah. What is the meaning of it? Most of it is not constructive. Most of it is what mammals do. Sorry, Peter, but I didn't prepare him for this.
You never do.
It's okay. We are two mammals now.
Oh God. That's really.
Would make a cute photo.
Yeah. And this is what we do, but verbally. So it's nothing more than that, to be convenient with each other. Smart men, yeah, they have something to say instead of just this this verbal, it's really within the comfort zone, and it's nothing more than that. Smart man provokes thinking, even by saying something or asking something, asking something which turns out the brain in order uh, to get you out from the comfort zone. That's something, and you can see the stories. Actually, I have one page's notes to reflect on whatever you said, and still, okay. So, sorry, speakers and listeners. It really depends on the mental stage. So it's really from psychology point of view. It really depends on which situation you are in. So on Friday, on Monday, I've been challenged a lot because Professor Heffer stood in front of me as a student, and she said, "I really mean it." And even though she has a lot to say, she was there to be a listener. Absolutely. Even though I'm very happy that you've been active and you didn't keep silent, but you cannot determine. So it really depends on the situation and on the actual hierarchy if you are a listener or a speaker. And sometimes it's out of your comfort zone because as a parent you need to speak to your kid even though you don't want to, but you need to save the kid's life. So sometimes you need to yell out loud, even though if you don't want to, but it can be life saving. You know that, Peter. So it's I just cannot give you. And it's way more important to analyze a speech as an outsider or inside. But but there are a couple of things I just wrote down that the sound signals. It's very important that how we learn language. There's this amazing still. Not so respected talk. I sent it over to you. It's a TEDx Stockholm talk about storytelling, and he this guy G.P. Phillips is talking about the different hormones, the different stories release. Different kind of stories will release different kind of hormones. So think about it. Have anyone seen the movie Silent Scream? It's a movie about an abortion. Maria, Professor Haffer, you didn't. Uh, when I was a teenager, we all had to watch this movie before sexual maturity. When time came, every student had to see a movie on an abortion. When they practically rip apart a baby, so it was not that small. And the final movement when they just crash the school. But whenever they enter the tool into the womb, you see that the embryo is trying to escape. The same thing happens if there is a bad tone from the outside. They try to move in. They try to move in within the womb, more inside mother's stomach. I'm glad you digest this a little bit. So whenever you grew up in an environment when you're hopefully not, but when the parents had very bad relationship with a lot of arguments, what mindset will you born? How will it affect your life, your communication, everything? You immediately start with the defensive mode from the very beginning. However, just to give you some more releasing stories, that my wife was blessed, or maybe not blessed. Okay, then we thought about it different way, but let's say she was blessed with twins. Okay, now you get my point. And whenever I arrive back from work, I open the door and I just say hello. And she said after a while they recognized my voice and they started to kick. They started to greet me. they knew. So consciously, I started to talk to them as well. Normally, not in a baby voice, but baby voice can be very effective, especially at small age. So don't forget about it. Be foolish, because it's very important to them. But you still don't have to act like a clown. So you need to find the proper balance. So the one thing was the greeting, but there was the other thing, because I have a course on personality types as well, and it all comes the 4 personality types, because there are several typologies, and it all comes from another ancient Greek wise man, Hippocrates, who divided 4 blood tempers. This is how he called, and it's about extroverts, introverts, who are the speakers, who are the listeners, task-oriented and relationship-oriented people. And my wife could listen to music when she was driving. I mean, meaning less stomach with the twins, but with the third one, who has a completely different character. What we just learned later, but we had the exception. She just tried to listen to music only once, because she was kicking her so hard inside that she never listened to music, especially with the proper tempo, because she was just really on. And yeah, now she's practicing judo, luckily. But so it's, I just cannot tell you, and all these the sound signals, they are transformed to feelings. This is something very, very important in human communication, because part of us, and most of the time, we are driven as animals, and we are all animals, and rarely we are rational species. And this is something what you always need to keep in mind, and we will see if I can involve you again, just like last time, for some play to prove how important it is. But the tonality what you're using is something extremely important. The other thing is vocabulary. There are so many things in human history, how a nation could be successful and others don't. There is something which is not that much highlighted, but have you ever think about how big British Encyclopedia is? How many words they have, or how many words Chinese have, and so on and so on. Strongly related about the nation's success, but you need to pass it on. Where significant art could be born, where the vocabulary is richer, when they can articulate, express themselves in a more variable way, that's the place where architecture borns. There is an ancient Latin saying, varietas delectat, if you know, variety delights, gives you pleasure. We just need it in every aspect of our life. Okay, so we see blue, gray, red, clothes, only clothes, everything. We need that, but I'm sure that Professor Heffer and I know that you don't have only red clothes. You need the variety, and I need the variety, and we all need that, and it's extremely important, not just in intelligence, and personal success, but also way wider range for a nation's success as well. Ready for the next one.
As I mentioned at the beginning, most of today's communication takes place through social networks. Do the speed and ease of information exchange conceal the consequences that virtual communication has on real communication?
Oh, we're gonna stay here forever. Okay, here is there's okay. One thing I just thought about it, and unfortunately this is the biggest trap in online communication, that everything got simplified. Actually, there is a move there's a move now if you because varietas dilectat, variety delights. Everything got simplified, and luckily now I see the process because it affects really the intelligence as well, and it has a terrible effect that any language all around the world, because of social media and simplified communication, just got reduced. So nowadays generation has less vocabulary than previous or 2 times previous generation, and it's a huge problem. But if you think about it, there is a hope, because I used to analyze this. That do you know that emojis started to born, and now we have tremendous amount of emojis, because we had just a few actually. Paul Ekman, anyone knows Paul Ekman? Is a world famous body language expert, and he stated the 6 different facial expressions, which is universal in any given culture. You probably heard about it. One is anger, for example, or happiness. It's just they are expressed in the same way, and we can recognize it, no matter which culture we are from. And there is another process now. There is a rebound, so we try to make it. It's just this species needs the variety in order to express themselves. So there are more emojis. We will see, because we are still in the middle of the process. But right after we had the simplified communication, even more simplified because of COVID, and now we see the results that these students who are just as smart, they just cannot memorize as many information. And it's just, there was this level, or actually, unfortunately, it went down in the past 20 years, and now there's this drop. And we have no idea. We are still investigating what is going on.
And finally, can you give us some tips on how to improve everyday communication?
Oh, yes. Okay, do we have volunteers? Peter is one. Yes, yes, of course. No, wait. Okay, in order to turn you on, it's just a simple game. And there's a documentary or a biography film on Whitney Houston. Anyone knows singer Whitney Houston? She unfortunately she passed away, and I just been in the U.S. in a conference 3 weeks before. I was on a plane and I met with the movie. I couldn't watch. Unfortunately, I couldn't watch it. I found it too late, so I couldn't watch it entirely. But her mother was a singer and teacher, and it was amazingly shown in the movie that she was just forced her daughter to repeat the word again and again and again and again. And of course, she was a teenager, and I was like, "Oh, Mom, why?" And she said, "You cannot sing it until you don't understand it. What does this word means in depth?" And this is something very important message. How you say every single word is one thing. And I have another story as well. But there was this X Factor or some talent shows. You must have voice or whatever. I don't know what is successful in Croatia. But there was a girl, Totally from the same place where you are from. Do you remember Totally?
Yeah. Actually, she attended the same music school as I did.
And there is this so famous song, "I Will Always Love You," from Whitney Houston. And in one previous talent show, there was a very talented singer who sang this song, and she won it. Anyway, she won it. And later, a couple of years later, this 12-year-old teenager tried to sing the same song. And it was just so ugly. Why? No, she was an amazing singer. But then the jury said that until you've never been in love, until you never had love. I mean, for real. And until you didn't experience a breakup, you will not be able to sing this song. Because you are unable to express the feelings which comes with it. You need to go all the heaven and hell of love. Otherwise, it's just not gonna work. And so there is another thing I wrote down. Oh yes. About effective communication. Okay, make it reliable. Show the passion. Okay, what is it? How Peter was talking? I'm just analyzing him. Okay, whenever he was talking, did the same just I did. Lean forward. Okay, because I do care. I want to give, or I just communicate you in a way. And of course, my tone will be completely different. I used to test you, and others. Sorry. No, other assistant lecturers. No. No, just whenever I call them up. No, Peter is better in that, luckily. But other ones, and I was just, are you sitting? How do you know? Are you lying on your couch? How do you know, Professor? I hear in your voice that you are on your couch, and it just, and they're terrified. But it's disrespectful. So just whenever you're talking on a phone, it has to be a respectful way, or show the interest. You can force yourself. My personal story about communication comes back to another one. I was performing in the U.S. in an international folk dancing ensemble, and in the Hungarian wedding, I was the best man. Not in a way, you know, the best man phrase, you know, who makes the ceremony. Of course, I was the best man. No. Okay, so I was the best. I had the best man role in the U.S. 80 times I had to deliver an original Hungarian best man talk. No one had a clue. Okay, what the hell does it mean? Okay, they were Americans, and I got really frustrated. So I started to play with my tone, also with my body. And after a couple frustrating weeks, because we had 80 shows within the school year, that's a lot. And an audience started to laugh at my Hungarian speech. And then there was one event when I was not in a good mood. And after the end of the show, it's folk dance, so you are actually ready to throw out your lungs. And the manager in that mood came to me that, hey, $50 penalty. And I was like, for what? I mean, I really danced out my soul and everything. And he said that just, they weren't laughing. I don't know what did you do in the past weeks, but they weren't laughing. And all the time, if they're not laughing, it's $50 penalty again, every show. So I learned the lesson that it's showtime, and whenever it's showtime, they didn't pay for your mental problems. So if you really want to give, if you really want to teach, then you really need to force passion. And in order to prove that there is this lovely story. It's a commercial radio station. Runs. It was Class FM. It was called Donahue's before. Now it's whatever. So it's a morning show, extremely successful, but it's commercial. So all the time they had a different ownership, and they're kind of stars. The three guys who were running the show, and they just recalled and analyzed this because, of course, they have debriefing after each morning show. They're analyzing what did they do well, what did they do wrong, and the ownership changed. So they sent over an Italian analyzer who didn't know anything about any Hungarian text, and he could point out every part just based on the tempo and tonality where something was wrong. And he knew what is it. understood. Not precisely, but they were just completely shocked. Because they are all transformed to feelings. Again, these are all feelings what we transform, and we are not learning it after childhood, but we learn it from the time we just started to born in the womb. So you are playing with feelings whenever you express, oh, this is something very important. Any volunteers? Peter, you need to act it all.
Let's do it.
No, all right. Okay, I tell you what to do. So I used to do it with my students. I teach mostly medical students, so I just downloaded the description of medicine from Wikipedia. But there are different styles you need to read it up, and they need to read it until the audience figure it out. And you will just recognize how different it feels, even though the text is the same standard boring thing. So who's after in this game? Sorry? You just need to read.
That's the problem. No offense. It was just
two more. Okay, Peter is one. The way we play it actually, that even though it's disrespectful, but not to be able to read any facial gestures, the spontaneous volunteer sits in that chair,
oh no.
in that chair, but showing his back to the audience. And yeah, anyone else? Anyone else? I know we have a small audience, but we should try. Very good, thank you. Sit in a line. Just grab that chair. Sit in a line with Peter. Lovely. Do we have a third one? Third volunteer? Thank you.
Three Musketeers.
Very good. Very good. So, rest of you now in the is still good. I can join you. I can join you. No, because I would like to. Get this one. Don't reveal. Don't reveal. Okay, you get this one. Again, the text is the same. So try to read it up in a way it's written there, but loud.
Medicine is the science and practice of caring for a patient, managing the diagnosis, prognosis, prevention, treatment, palliation of the injury of disease, and promoting their health. Medicine encompasses a variety of healthcare practices that work to maintain and restore health by the prevention of treatment.
Any ideas? Sorry to interrupt. Any idea?
Boring.
Boring, bored. Yeah. Okay. Here we go. Okay. Next. Good.
Medicine is the science and practice of caring for a patient, managing the diagnosis, prognosis, prevention, treatment, palliation of the injury or disease, and promoting their health. Medicine encompasses a variety of healthcare practices involved to maintain and restore health by the prevention and treatment of illness. Contemporary medicine applies biomedical sciences, biomedical research, genetics, and medical technology to diagnose, treat, and prevent injuries and diseases.
What is the mood?
Tutorial.
Tutorial. Okay. I will give you a tip. Wait, man. Wait for that. Okay. Just keep it. Your turn.
Medicine is the science of practice and caring for a patient, managing the diagnosis, prognosis, prevention, treatment, palliation of the injury of disease, and promoting their health. Medicine encompasses a variety of healthcare practices involved to maintain and restore health by prevention of treatment of illness. Contemporary medicine applies biomedical sciences, biomedical research, genetics, and medical technology to diagnose, treat, and prevent injury and disease, typically through pharmaceuticals or surgery, but also through therapies as diverse as psychotherapy. external splints and traction, medical devices, biologics, and ionizing radiation, amongst others.
Okay. Are you an introverted person?
Maybe. Not sure. Probably a mix. Depends on the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Just to give you a help that is more dominantly introverted. This is very important. What kind of personalities we talk about? How do they express their emotions? By the way. No? Any idea? Excited. Yes. Of course, if it was an extroverted person, excited was completely differently delivered, for sure. In your particular case, just let me whistle a little bit. Try to get it up.
Medicine is the science and practice of caring for a patient, managing the diagnosis, prognosis, prevention, treatment, palliation of the injury or disease, and promoting their health. Medicine encompasses a variety of healthcare practices evolved to maintain and restore health by the prevention and treatment of illness. Contemporary medicine applies biomedical sciences, biomedical research, genetics.
Yeah. Sorry to stop. Okay, now do you have any idea?
Yeah, it's kind of a hard one.
No, you are just any idea? Was it positive or negative?
Positive.
Definitely positive. Okay. No, it's still good. Okay, it's very important that this is how we divide. This is the first thing whenever we hear a voice. If it is enemy or friend, if you remember from last time, yeah. If you read up more fairy tales, then it will be. So it was kind, actually. What he should. Okay, he said it's difficult. No worries. But here is my final message. That during the dinner, you did a great job. No worries. And it's hard. But you were just so smiling that I was like, yes.
I would like to say something regarding this.
Yeah.
So, when you're speaking to someone, the thing that I said, non-verbal conversation and the non-verbal part is really important. Just by the voice of the person, we cannot tell which type of emotion they're expressing because, as you mentioned, we don't know are they introverted, are they extroverted, how they function, how they present themselves. That's why I think that there's non-verbal part, and because we could not see them, they're Pecs to us. Maybe if we saw them, we would be.
No, it was way more too easy, and this is why we are playing only this task.
And Drew actually whispered me to kind of, force a smile and see if there are any differences. I can expect it to not be such a huge difference, and I mean, it wasn't, but I guess the audience actually guessed it's a positive feeling, it's a positive emotion, so I guess.
Because if you force smiling, if you just imitate, and remember, please, whenever you talk on the phone, and there is this amazing, famous example. I'm sorry, I'm not going to show my back to you. Sorry about that. When Churchill convinced Dunkirk story, have you seen the movie? No? Okay, but there was this in French mainland, 200,000 British soldiers were surrounded by Nazis, but also Frenchmen, and he convinced civilians to risk their own life, and thousands of ships went to rescue them, and most of them were rescued. Actually, all these over 200,000 people would be executed. And he used only his voice. And this is what I try to say here. Within the womb, where you start to grow and to learn human communication, you have no meta communication at all. You just hear the voice. This is the first thing, how you learn to communicate. And whenever you are down in the basement in a safe place and the red light is on, he didn't have any opportunity to use his body language to convince against an entire nation to risk their own life in order to save not just English, but the historical enemy Frenchmen as well, and they did. So it's just your tonality has an extreme significance in order to communicate properly. I would like to give an applause to our three. We just play this game. This is one of my read a lot of fairy tales, but the other thing is just write this, have a standard test, and try to play this game. Read it in different style, and whenever you read it in different style, you will realize how rich you are, how different you can communicate the same different stuff. And of course, I could say it in a completely different way about Disney movies, and I could slow down because there was this other thing that it's just really sped up. So I don't know if you recognize this is not the tempo I'm used to talk to whenever we are talking with Professor Hefner. This is not the tempo, but whenever I'm in front of public, I have to speed up because otherwise I'm boring. Because the tempo of the speech just sped up in the past couple of decades, everywhere, globally. It's just because of the quick communication and a lot of stimuli affects us, it just sped up. So the tempo which was working 20 years before, it doesn't work. It's boring now. Boring for my own kids. So we need to, and you need to force yourself. If you're in a different situation, you need to use a different tempo as well. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you, Professor. Are there any questions? Okay, and now we can end another Science Cafe. Thank you all for listening and participating, and see you soon.